Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guests are Lesley Mitchell Clarke and Wes Roberts. First, I have a couple of announcements. Check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. It's the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. This is where you find some of your favorite podcasts from our community. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Odyssey, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. And Rokfin is where you get the premium content, as well as all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin. That's only $10 a month. Our social media is also Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All those links are right there in the description. Today I want to welcome Lesley Mitchell Clarke and Wes Roberts. Lesley is a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in a number of modalities, including working with individuals who feel that they have had experiences with extraterrestrial beings. Wes Roberts is a 30-year contract college professor who has had hints of alien visitation dating back to his teens. Because of a consciously recalled experience in the 1980s, he eventually became convinced his experiences could not be explained away by conventional theories. Lesley, Wes, welcome. How you both doing?
Oh, just great. Thank
Very
you,
good,
Chris, and
thank
thank you so much for welcoming us back to the program. We're happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you both. Lesley, I've had you on before. Wes, this is your first time. I've been looking forward to this. Today we're going to be discussing the new book you co-wrote, Intersection, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. I was just telling Wes about this. I believe personal contact experiences are some of the most important evidence that we could currently have to get an understanding of this phenomenon. And this book tells Wes's incredible story throughout his experiences up to working with you, Lesley, through hypnosis. Now, Wes, like I said, you've had incredible experiences, which we will definitely get into today. First, Lesley, it's been a while since you've been on. Briefly remind the audience about yourself and what brought you to work with Wes, and then we'll get your background, Wes, after that.
Sure.
Okie dokie. Well, I have been a board-certified clinical master hypnotherapist for close to 20 years now. It wasn't my first career. I had a long career in show business, all parts of it, and still work as a singer every once in a while, as long as they'll let me. I became interested in using regression techniques and working with experiencers very, very early on, after I first became certified as a what is it they call it, a consulting hypnotist. So I had to go through several, episodes of training and further schooling to learn metaphysical hypnosis first, which is the use of past life regression, interlife regression, and what we call entity release or energy release. And at the time, I was probably legally ready to work with these individuals. I was working at a very snazzy hypnosis clinic in an area of Toronto that would be like Beverly Hills in the Yorkville area. And about once a month, we would get someone calling into the office, someone who sounded completely sane, but was talking about possible evidence of having a contact experience, missing time, marks on the body, you name it. Now, none of the other practitioners wanted to touch this with a 10-foot pole. And I thought, well, at last, I'm being sent, these people that I really, really desire to work with. And so that's kind of how the momentum got going. And, I didn't reinvent the wheel. I simply adapted, accepted past life regression techniques to work specifically with experiencers rather than guiding people through their past life experiences. So, I met Wes, interestingly enough, through a referral of another a wonderful gal named Barb Keshen, who is the top pediatric hypnotherapist, certainly in our country, maybe in the world. And I was privileged to study with her. Anyway, she knew Wes and sent him to see me. And I think after that first experience of inducting him into hypnosis and already, leading him through several experiences. I think he was somewhat flabbergasted. And I remember him saying over and over again, is this real? Is this real? And that's how our professional relationship, and also our very deep friendship and the work that we have done as collaborators. That's how everything all began at my little hypnosis place, light work hypnosis in the womb room, as I call it.
All right. Well, that's a great introduction. All right, Wes, tell us about your background. How did this all start for you?
Yeah, sure thing. So I've always been interested in the topic of UFOs, but it came and went in my life. I was in MUFON way back in the day, and then I rejoined a few years ago. But I had an experience in the 1980s that was either hyper real or surreal. I don't know which of the two, but I woke up from the experience. I was experiencing a distortion in time. I was looking at a digital clock, and it was clicking through the minutes as if they were seconds. I was literally just staring at it. And I remembered everything. And I went into another room. I was living with a girlfriend at the time, and scratched down on paper what had gone on. And then it dogged me, it bugged me for years, almost 20 actually. Bugged me for years. And I kept replaying it in my mind. And I kept thinking, when I had the nerve, I want to go back. There's some things I'm sure that aren't clear to me. Pardon me. So eventually, as the 90s gave way to the 2000s and so on, I was getting increasingly irritated. And I'm a college prof, so I'm very boring and analytical, actually. So this
I wouldn't say that.
So this part of me was really odd, and it's not that I'm not magical or mystical or open. I am all those things, but it really dogged me, and so it was beginning to affect what I felt was my performance on the job. I don't think anyone else noticed it, but I did. And then it was also making me quite irritated, and I could barely sleep because I was afraid to go to sleep, quite honestly. If I closed my eyes, they would come get me. And so it was quite awful for a while. So I finally consulted with a couple of close friends. One of them said if she were me, she would get it checked out. So I waited another year. So that's about 20 years at this point. And finally, I tried to find a hypnotherapist. And Lesley told you how I got introduced to her. And then we started this long relationship, which is to this day, but the hypnosis relationship was 5 years, over 30 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, I think... Go ahead, Lesley.
I was just going to say that is quite unusual. Mm-hmm. To be able to have the advantage of working with someone's journey for that length of time. And I feel really blessed that I have had that experience. And it certainly, I think, made for a pretty interesting book.
For sure, 100%. Well, Wes, I think a good place to start would be to tell us about that initial experience and what you remembered at first from it and how you gained more insight into it later.
Surely, yeah. Thanks for such a great question. I remember it was in 5 stages, and this is very common. I would have to tell you, Chris, and tell your viewers, the stages or the staging is very common. So they play out scenarios and put you in them, and they want to find out how you'll respond or react. And they're generally emotional, or at least a component is. So in the first stage, I was just at an airport in the middle of the night. Highly unusual. I should have said to myself, this isn't right, but I didn't. I was at an airport watching planes take off in the sky. And one of the planes, at least part of it, burst into flames. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm in a panic. I'm looking around the airport. There seems to be no one around me. Then something appeared to my left, and I never got a good look at it.
Was this like a dream state that you were in, or you just kind of found yourself in an airport, or it was a dream state type of thing?
Yeah, a lot of a lot of abductions or experiences are psychophysical. They abduct your spirit.
Yeah.
This is not to say you don't feel it, or you don't go through the trauma. So only a handful of my experiences were physical that I'm aware of. But I'm not sure about parts of it, to be quite honest. And Lesley might be able to comment on that in a little bit. So I was at the airport looking. I was in a panic. That was phase one. Phase two, I found myself in the dark. So there's a slight period of missing time, I believe. I found myself in the dark. I entered some double doors and walked into what seemed to be a pristine apartment or condo. I mean, like not lived in, as if it had been created for me just before I got there. And so I don't want to draw this out too long. You can tell me how long is too long.
Whatever you feel, there's the details that the audience would need to best understand it. You can go as long as you want.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I got to explore the apartment or the condo back and forth. Nothing changed. And this is one of the distinguishing things I found about this experience. In a dreamscape, things are fluidic. A phone will turn into a watermelon or something. You know what I mean? You'll look at yourself in the mirror and you'll change 20 times. But everything stayed static, stable. I was able to walk up and down the hallway several times, bedroom, look at photographs of apparently me, did not look like me, with my family, did not look like my family, until I began to question the reality of being there. And at that point, this being that seemed to be shadowing me around the room basically communicated to me it was time to go. And it's like, okay. So
Did you see the being at all? Were you able to see that?
Chris, just that it was brown skinned, nothing from the waist up. And I've seen these beings before. Its skin looked like it was unfinished, kind of like pitted, kind of like it had been sandblasted, like it was a work in progress. So that's a good question because I rarely get to see these. And I'm sure I know I'm not the only one. So I was walked out onto an airport tarmac. An identical being joined me on my other side. And there were 50 to 100 other humans being walked across what appeared to be an airfield. And we were walked towards something like a processing center. I thought I was going to an airport or something. I wasn't sure. So the next phase was I went through a turnstile, kind of like customs, and I saw this shaft or this cylinder that was, I took it to be an elevator. So I got in it, swish, the door shut closed with a hiss. I had extreme light above me and below me, pardon me, like I couldn't shield myself against the light. It was so bright. When the door opened, I found myself in the last phase of the experience, which was back at the airport with my family and wife there to meet me as if nothing had happened. So that's a shorter version of the experience.
Right on. Now, how long did it take you between the initial experience till you actually started to seek some answers about it?
That would be the 20 years I talked about.
Right.
I just said for so many years, Chris, I said, this isn't me. I'm not one of those people. I had met abductees, I think in the 90s, and quite honestly, I was creeped out. And so it's like, this is not me, until finally, maybe it is me.
Now, did you have any other types of unexplained experiences within those 20 years?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I've had a few consciously recalled experiences where I'll get up in the morning and it's like, okay, that wasn't a dream. I wasn't out of the body. It wasn't a hallucination. I wasn't taking drugs. Just go through the list. And those are the things I was not doing. So I've had many. I continue to have them to this day, although they are less frequent.
Well, let's get into some of the things that you started recalling once you started working with Lesley. And Lesley, how did you feel about his experience the first time you heard about it? And could you tell us about maybe a little bit about that first session?
Well, I think I was surprised at how much conscious memory he did have around this event that was as he recalled at the time, the triggering event. Also, I think, yes, they were using staging, the beings, but also I think it could be a mashup. I'm not altogether convinced that he was just taken in a psychophysical way, especially the experience where they walk toward, he thinks he's going through some processing station and they walk towards this tube. Now, the tube and the light flashing and feeling like your body is being extended is something that I have heard about from many experiencers. And it appears to be something not unlike the Montauk chair that lets us pass between dimensions or large distances. It could be even very similar to the Star Trek transporter. It certainly seems as such because it is always, in my experience with the individuals who have spoken to me about it, it's always tubular. And there's bright light, and many individuals also have the strange sensation that their body is stretching. So when I heard about that, I immediately knew that that something big was up. Now, also, what Wes didn't mention is these screen memories, which I believe we could call them psionic projections, and I think that most of the evolved races that we engage with or that engage with us have a large amount of psionic ability, meaning that they can project thought forms that are so strong that they appear physical to us. And these techniques are used often with children. In other words, also what Wes didn't mention is, but I don't remember if it was the first session, but soon after that, we journeyed back in his own life and we discovered, which again was no surprise, that he was a lifelong experiencer. I don't believe that there is any such thing as a person with a single experience. I honestly don't. And I also think that memory suppression times out because I think it's done with our own body chemistry and not allowing certain memories to imprint on the neurons, which is how memory works. But in that experience that he was describing, as I was saying, another interesting thing about these projected screen images is they very often have anachronistic elements to them. And by that, I mean, I believe I remember Wes telling me that in this, otherwise modern contemporary apartment was a kind of what we used to call a telephone table, which you're too young to even remember, but my grandparents had one from the days where there was one telephone and it was heavy and it was black and it sat on the little thing and then you had a little notepad and that's all you needed. So to see something like that, when he was describing it in the session, I almost laughed. And there are many, many little funny anachronistic things. And you wonder, they were mining his brain to find an environment. And obviously they stepped into a few episodes of I Love Lucy.
Yeah. Now, I want to get each of your insights into what these astral realms are, if these are types of realities that exist around us at all times that we just can't perceive, that these beings are able to kind of take our consciousness or our soul or spirit to during these unconscious sessions, and if you would consider that kind of like astral travel. What do you think about that, Lesley?
Well, first of all, I would say that most of the interactions, and we know this from the big studies that have been done by MUFON and also the Free organization, both of which I participated in. We know that most experiences that people have are either benevolent or benign. It's only less than 20% of the experiences that are, reported as being horrific or traumatic. And frankly, most of those relate to things that have happened to individuals under the auspices of some dark secret space program, combined efforts of some Zeta Reticulites and the American military or the world's military, however you want to see it. So I would have to say that the I'm sorry, what did you ask me? I lost my brain. My brain went blank for a moment. The
No, what's your understanding of the astral realms, if these are
oh
actual
gosh,
different realities that they
yes.
take us to?
I think personally, I think it's a combination of all of the things that you mentioned.
Mhm.
I think that there are ultra-terrestrials who are very comfortable simply adjusting their vibrations to pass from one dimension to another. I also think there are ETs that are just as physical and firmly affixed in the third density as we are. They just have more advanced tech. So I think it's a combination of things. I remember working with one experiencer who, again, like Wes, was a lifelong experiencer, and she had a particular being that always was sort of assigned to her and accompanied her on various adventures and things that they did. And the gal, the experiencer, asked to be shown the home planet of the being, who was presenting as very physical and very humanoid. I mean, possibly, someone who a being you would think might be a Pleiadian or Arcturian, someone who could pass, who's so genetically related to us that they would be indistinguishable from a humanoid for a humanoid Homo sapiens sapien. So the advanced being said, well, our planet is not actually very far, and showed a position in within this actual solar system. But she said, unfortunately you can't see it because of the limitations you have in looking into other realms. So we are probably dealing with a lot of civilizations that we simply don't see because our vibration is so low. And in our work together, Wes and I also explored his interlife, and we discovered, and we're not the only ones to experience that in our so-called interlife, or heaven, if you wish, wherever we pass to when we leave our physical body, there are all kinds of extraterrestrials walking around and engaging in councils and doing this. Now, one wonders, is our idea of heaven, could it be just simply another dimension where negative emotions don't exist, and where our cellular bodies are made of light matter instead
Makes me
of
wonder
dense
if that's the
physical
true
matter.
reality, and this is just an experiential thing that we're experiencing now in this physical world. I don't know. Big questions there.
It seems like that.
Yeah.
It seems like that. And of course, this is known. Many ET beings have conveyed to people I've worked with that planet Earth here is kind of known as the grand experiment, because it's unusual. Planet Earth is unusual in the sense that we have the contributions of so many different groups of ETs who have contributed to the beings that we are. We are the hybrids, and not just from the Anunnaki. And we had the Pleiadians here, the Lyrans were here, beings from Mars were here, humanoid beings from Mars. So we have received either through cross-pollination in a natural way, or through genetic upgrading. We are carrying an awful lot of DNA, and we have a wide spectrum of development. We've got people, we've got like Charles Manson and Adolf Hitler and horrible political ne'er-do-wells on one side. That was deft the way I walked around that. And then we have, on the advanced area, we got the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa, and so we have a big spectrum of beings, of souls in progress. And right now, I think what we're seeing an awful lot of is an awful lot of people have come back into this incarnation who have probably led very recent lives on other planets. And the term we use for that is starseeds. And my feeling is that Wes, from the recollections we've explored, he has had many lifetimes, especially living as this particular type of being that he now engages with so easily.
Right on. Wes, anything to add about these different realities, different realms, or anything else that Lesley said?
For sure. So Lesley was right on the money. They pluck funny things from our minds or what we might have seen on television. So there was actually a black rotary dial phone in that experience and a little black book, literally. They did not change. I was able to use the phone or try to use it. I was able to look in the little black book. As far as multiple dimensions, I believe we live in not just a multiverse, but something others call the omniverse. So the omniverse includes the spiritual realm. And so all possible universes, spiritual and otherwise, our alien friends, mostly friends, are able to walk back and forth through any realm, including our afterlife, which we had thought was so sacred. That's easily accessible to them.
Yeah.
And so I think that this mashup of experiences was absolutely true. The apartment was probably real. The transporter was probably real. Some of the other stuff was not real. It was a mishmash. And we were later to find out in my hypnosis sessions, and we can get to this. There's a being I call my twin, which we can get to if we get a chance. But I was later to find out my twin, that was just to get my attention. This whole experience was just to get my attention. It was a test. Are you awake? Are you paying attention? Are you going to go out to the world and speak about these things? So I was quite annoyed when I found that out because it didn't feel like a test back then. So that's what I would add to it.
Well, I'd love to hear about that experience with the twin.
Sure. And Lesley's perspective on this is going to be great too. So it was either my first or second hypnosis session when I found out that the 1980s experience wasn't exactly so relevant, that I've been going through stuff all my life. And earlier in my life, they were more physical abductions than they were spiritual abductions. So when I first met my twin, I'm sure she's not mine, but I'll use that term. When I first met the twin, I met her as a little boy, and she was a little girl, a little alien girl, and we were in somebody's farmhouse. It was a real location. I only say that because I asked mentally during the experience, is this real? Is this place real? And they said, yeah, the owners are out. So, okay. It was my job to guide this little girl around this farmhouse and show her the things that we experienced as humans. And she kind of looked a little bit spindly, not exactly what we would call normal. But I took her hand and took her around the home. And she didn't understand what a fridge was. She didn't know what food was inside the fridge. She didn't understand what a cupboard or a shelf was. And so I was explaining to her what these things were. And so we walked around the farmhouse and we ended up where I was about to take her up the stairs. I don't know why. I guess I was being directed to. And she stopped because she was afraid. She didn't want to go up the stairs. She didn't know how, among other things. And it's like, okay, experience ends. And this twin has always been with me, perhaps before when I was a little kid. And she's appeared in countless ways in other experiences. And we even took the time to try to do a form of channeling with her in real time.
And your understanding of what this entity is has changed since you've gained a better understanding through hypnotherapy?
Yeah, I was frustrated for the longest time, and I still am to a certain extent, because I just want her to sit over there on the couch so I can see her. But she doesn't appear that way, and she has multiple guises. And at one point, she admonished me, and she said, basically, this is on me. Like, I don't know how to raise myself to a high enough vibration to communicate directly with her. So she changes me or changes the very atmosphere around me so she can come to me. And I'm sure Lesley can talk about a key experience in her hypnosis place where the environment changed.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That happened a number of times, because after we had mined, and explored, an awful lot of experiences that Wes had, as he mentioned, we really began to focus on real-time communication. And I think an important thing to keep in mind is that linear time is not real. It doesn't, it's not that at all. We simply have created linear time as humanoids so we can get things done and show up and graduate from college and all these different things, but it's not real. So it's possible psychically, telepathically, to reach out to any beings that we have had experiences with. I have many of my experiences that I work with regularly now working in the area of real-time communication. So it's a little bit more like what Daryl Anka does with Bashar. I'm not talking about a trans-channeling particularly, but I will ask questions and the entity or being will relay their answers through and that's what they want. This is disclosure. This is how it's going to work. It is a grassroots movement. The advanced ETs, of which there are many, have become completely disgustipated with our governments and the way they work. And I know that they have made so many attempts. In fact, the arrival of Valiant Thor, who I was either Venusian and he lived in Washington, D.C. for, I think, 5 years, trying to convince individuals about, free energy and food production and curing illnesses. And the governments didn't want it to hear about it because they were terrified of economic collapse. It's like, well, what do we do if we're not burning coal? It was fear-based. And I think that was extremely frustrating for many. I think they tried to do like a Michael Rennie, the day the earth stood still thing. I know the White House was buzzed by UFOs. We have it. You can watch it on YouTube. So this real-time communication is, for me, really where it's at as far as getting fascinating up to the moment information. I believe now that there is a kind of a Gene Roddenberry-esque federation of planets, if you will, of benevolent beings. I believe that those of us that are here working in this area and also the contactees are having contact by choice. It's something that they agreed to take on before they entered physical life, which is probably like, what Wes is not only, he's been involved in many metaphysical processes. He's extremely psychic. I think that's the great leveler. I think they need people with a little extra oomph in the PSI department to do what they need to do. And so they either follow genetic lines or star seeds come in who are set up from that on a soul level. So what happened with Wes and his twin is, during our work together, I'm also going to say that the beings of which the twin is one, I believe they have no problem with taking Wes physically because he's had triangles, he's had scoop marks, he's had various physical manifestations where they are checking up on him just to see how he's doing, physically. It's not aggressive, it's not torturous, but there is definitely a physical component to this as well, I would have to say. Now, in the first time that we attempted this real-time communication with his twin, the first thing that I noticed that happened is the room, the room heated up and the atmosphere felt almost viscous. Now, a viscous, thick atmosphere is something that you will hear about from many contactees that you might talk to on your show or anywhere else. It seems to be, many beings seem to need to alter our environment, at least on a small level. This is nothing toxic. It's just the air feels heavy and it's very hot all of a sudden. And I actually saw with my naked eyes, an impression. It looked like a overlay, a little bit like a double exposure of the being that Wes calls his twin overlaying, like placing herself right over his body. And the form that I saw was alternately looked humanoid and sometimes just like a light being, but was taller. And Wes is a really tall guy. So I would have to say that this being, from what I saw, was presenting as about 7 feet tall, would be my guess. So I alternated between seeing an interesting, thin, humanoid form without hair to just a light being. So that was the psychic image I was getting, was the light being, probably. I don't know. These things don't. This was a first for me, and we tried it again later, and we tried to photograph it. And in fact, it did happen again in the sense that I saw the overlay, but it didn't show up on the digital camera.
That's interesting. Now, Wes, do you have any recollection of any of the more physical encounters that you have, or even after hypnosis, remembering something?
I usually remember things, and hypnosis always. I always remember. I also have, the recordings of them to help me along, to help me write a book or two, but I always remember. And so I recall Lesley saying to me one day, I felt okay. I didn't live far away. I drove to her place and drove back, and she cautioned me to sort of hang tight for half an hour or so because I wasn't quite down to earth. So I recall it all, the session she just talked about. I was really hot, and I felt.
You were you felt physically warm as well, which is, by the way, totally unusual in hypnosis, because your blood pressure goes down. To feel warm in hypnosis is very odd.
Yeah, so I was really hot, and I felt a bit of nausea, and I felt like I was moving. I was not moving. And I felt this thing, and I was trying to feel my hands and trying to get a sense of this thing. My impression was she was trying to show me her perspective, let's say. And, yes, we asked her at times about did she have a planet? Did she have buildings? This kinds of things. That's not really my personal interest. I want to know more about her philosophy and her connectivity. And thanks to these many sessions, I would say, she has told me she's always with me. She's never not here.
So maybe, and evolved beings are able to have their consciousness go in all different directions simultaneously, because again, that is our true nature. We can all do it. This is what I want to say to your peeps today. When these beings come, they don't come with an attitude of superiority. They really don't. They come to reinforce that we are also, and this sounds corny, children of God, children of the creations of the universe. We are in an equal par with them. We have had many challenges here. We've had geological challenges where the whole race was set back and regressed. We had the flood, we've had meteor showers, the Anunnaki were messing about with nuclear nukes, hence all the vitrified sand, in the area where they were trying to wipe each other out. So we've been through a lot of stuff. And I think that from the perspective of beings that have for so long been past that, and are, they don't judge us. In fact, there is no judgment. There's not even any judgment in what we would call heaven. And being raised as a Catholic, this is the antithesis of the fear-based things that we are all taught in. I don't care what religion you come from, whether you're Muslim or Jewish, there this fear of God and of a judgmental figure or figures seems to be spread throughout the planet.
Now, I want to get each of your thoughts on the directions that we are obviously being intentionally steered by some very large factions that are in control and have a lot of power. There's two different directions, it seems. There's one that we're being steered into a very technological, controlled age of being merged with forms of biology, and less spiritual and less human. And there's this other side that is this more what we would consider spiritual side, trying to evolve our consciousness. And this is where the contact experiences come in. This is where what I consider genuine contact experiences, what you would call extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, come in, versus the manufactured experiences like you've briefly mentioned earlier, that are involved with black factions and secret space programs that are taking people, giving them nefarious experiences, but probably also to put forward a certain narrative into the UFO community. There's a lot of infiltration right now. There's a lot of high-level individuals that are trying to put a certain perspective on the UFO community and steer it in a certain direction, and actually portray it as a threat other than something that is evolving us spiritually or conscious evolution. And I want to get each of your thoughts on both of those different sides that we're kind of being directed to, if you want to say.
Well, if I might just jump in there again, we're talking about manipulation through fear. And unfortunately, that is a tool that has been used since the dawn of time to influence and terrorize and suppress people who have, in their opinion, lesser intelligence or lesser awareness. And there's a lot of information about those times. Michael Tellinger's book, Slave Species of the Gods, it's a must read. But I don't believe that is the situation now, although the old guard is trying really hard to hang on to their nasty, greedy, soulless ways of behavior. I personally don't think we need much help from ETs to be terrible to each other. Right. So I'm really not. Yes, we have the Masonic organizations. They're by and large guys that just like to dress up and march around. I mean, I am not really feeling this idea of the ageless Illuminati, who want to continue to control. We do hear from ETs that yes, there are selfish, negative beings on the planet, and I think as above, so below. I think there are also negative, selfish ETs, but less of them. And they're going to congregate with the negative, selfish humanoids. But at this point, I think we have a majority of enlightened people now. I think we are 53%. I think one of the reasons why so much contact is happening, and also that so many beings are showing their craft, allowing themselves to be seen. I think that there has been a shift. And the reason that we're seeing more things is because we are able to perceive more in the nature of subtle energy. And I also don't think that there is anything, that it is impossible for technology and spirituality to be together. The beings that have survived their own techno era understand that deeply. In fact, I often use the metaphor that what we're going through now.
Oh, Lesley froze up there for a minute.
With our nearly instant communication.
Oh, looks like somebody doesn't like what Lesley has to say there.
Okay, it's not unusual. Can you see me now?
Yes, you're back now. Yeah. You just got cut out for a second.
All right. Well, I would just only say that many of the species that we engage with have successfully integrated technology into their civilizations without sacrificing spirituality. I think that it's entirely possible, and I think what we're going through now with our tech is a lot like having training wheels, and that the ability to have instant communications nearly at the speed of thought is stimulating the idea that it's possible. which will then translate to further training, our whole planet vibrating at a higher level. More people will be able to communicate telepathically, and this is the beautiful future that I'm focusing on. I'm not, because we can manifest whatever we want. It is a universe of free will.
Very well said. Wes, what do you think about that? Any thoughts on what is happening with the two different sides of where we're being steered of humanity and maybe the beings behind it all?
Definitely. Lesley mentioned integration. So, integration is a key point of what happened to me, and hopefully can happen to more of us or more people like me. But I guess I'd like to make 4 quick points. One is, I think this is all happening because aliens are us. That's who we are. And so that's one of the things I'm supposed to be, holding up a torch about in life. When I speak about this so much, it's like, we're there. We are them. They're trying to get our attention and say, you know what? You're in such a minute world that you could really broaden your horizons if you only understood the majesty of everything that we can be. Humans generally aren't, and I mean no denigration to anyone by this, they're not great communicators. We're not always perfect at communicating. This is something they've taught me, and it's like, this is a communications piece. So if we can communicate to you, Wes, or anyone else, any of the 3 of us, and millions more, then it's my job to go out and say, it's happened. I want to say to people, this might have happened to you. I'm supposed to tell you that. Reflect on your life for a minute and see if that's true or how true it is. But we are in such a finite world that is not happening very well. And as Lesley has said, we're trying to be scared. People are promoting fear. This reminds me of Carpenter's movie, They Live. If you're familiar with that movie. So the subtle messages we're getting maybe aren't so subtle, and that's what we're trained and indoctrinated to believe. And I strongly feel we need to break our indoctrination and think for ourselves and say, you know what? My experiences, 5% were unpleasant, 5 to 10%, and they were very unpleasant. But the other 90 or 95% were very positive. And it's all about spreading the news and enlightening people.
And if I could just add one more tiny thing about, dispelling fear, we have to remember that the terrible Truman era agreement that was made with the Zeta Reticulites, where so much DNA material was taken from individuals, sperm and ova, and they were doing breeding programs, and that's over. It timed out. There was a contract, and the Zetas honored it, and it's over. And so what is a blessing now is, I really, unless they're like my age, unless they're of a certain age, they're too young, thank God, to have had those types of involuntary experiences that involve the Zeta Reticulites, where DNA material is extracted. I know that Wes has had a couple of those experiences, but they essentially have timed out. So there's nothing to fear. And if you're out there listening to this show and this is resonating with you, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. I can almost assure you that there won't be a negative behind it, and that you have entered into something as your soul path through free choice. So please don't let fear stop you from exploring your own grandeur as a spirit, as a being.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Now, Wes, are you still having conscious experiences to this day?
I do. I have them perhaps once a month. Nothing too crazy, nothing too overwhelming. And I still have periods where I get afraid to close my eyes at night. And I think it's a throwback to what I went through before undergoing hypnosis. But what I do, Chris, and I would suggest anybody do this. If you have an experience that you think, was that a dream or not, go through the process of elimination. Do the Holmesian logic on it. Do the detective work. Why wasn't it a dream? Why wasn't it an out of the body experience? Why wasn't it just hallucination? And you're probably going to end up with the one remaining fact that's true. It was an experience.
So use Occam's razor.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, and do keep in mind that your experiences can be very individual, and they may not even be physical in the sense that you would think of it. So as we were discussing, we are in the omniverse. There's all kinds of communication going on from various beings. So your experiences will be uniquely yours.
Now, Lesley, have you found throughout your experience working with hypnotherapy that it's possible that a lot of what we are understanding as mental illness, schizophrenia, could actually be something more, that we're actually tapping into something beyond another form of intelligence?
Well, as someone who I worked in mental health for many years. I was a psychiatric nurse in a state mental hospital, so I had a chance to observe serious mental illness close up and personal. Mm-hmm. What I will say is I do believe that when individuals are in certain states of mania or certain aspects of a dissociative disorder, somehow maybe it's the pineal gland, because all of their glands are going crazy, but the pineal gland, starts sending DMT, and I have seen individuals channel beings for hours on end from the padded room. So there is a connection between things that can have manifestations that can happen with severe mental illness, and but I certainly, and forgive me if this seems so old school, I do think that these are illnesses that are transmitted often genetically. Schizophrenia can run in a family for generations, and but with help, we're starting to unlock the genome, and we're beginning to treat mental illness in a completely different way than we did before. So being mentally ill does not necessarily mean that you're not having extraterrestrial experiences. But unfortunately, in Canada, I am not legally allowed to work with any individual who has been diagnosed with a serious mental illness. And by that, I mean like borderline personality disorder, again, schizophrenia, dissociative disorder, manic depression, bipolar, you name it. So even though someone may come to me and I can tell that their experience has probably been real, if they manifest certain issues, certain symptoms, I have to make a judgment, and I always err on the side of the protection of the patient. But I don't leave people hanging out to dry, because I have a network of fully qualified psychologists, psychotherapists, and psychiatrists who are open to the contactee phenomena, and who will work with these individuals and be able to treat the whole person. If there is an illness, it can be treated in however that person deems probative. But so there you go.
Yeah. Well, do you think that there are more people who are experiencing contact and abduction than we would ever imagine? I mean, even myself, I've had it seems to be years of missing time as a kid that I have no understanding of.
Wow.
And, I'm hoping to eventually get some hypnotherapy, but there's also a lot of people that I talk to that just have, huge chunks of their life that they don't remember, things that they may be blocked out. Do you think this is occurring for more people than you think?
I think contact is far more widespread than any of us can remember, or any of us can imagine. I mean, the amount of UFO reports, contact reports that have been filed, 14 million, 17 million, bigger than the state of New York. Some individuals are estimating that 3/4 of the people on the planet have had contact of some sort. So this is a large-scale operation to wake us up and it's nothing to be afraid of. But yes, I completely agree that we don't have any idea of the real numbers, that it's way beyond what we could imagine.
Now, Wes, you're actually working on material for a second book, is that right?
So the second book is done.
Oh, nice.
I guess our friend didn't maybe send you that info. So
No.
apologies that didn't happen, but I can certainly follow up with you. A second book was called An Experiencer's Garden, and
Great.
it's basically my attempt to explain by categorizing things, categorizing landscapes, categorizing aliens, categorizing emotions, categorizing places and faces. So that's how I started out, by thinking, let me categorize all this stuff, scenarios, trains, strange places, spaceships, whatever. And then I ended up spending a huge part of the book trying to tackle the question, why me? And it's odd that people would even ask it in view of how many people have probably gone through this. But I spent the last part of the book, a huge part of the book, saying, why me? Why did I go through this? And one of the things was mentioned earlier, but there's probably a whole host of things that played into not just why me for one time, but why me for a lifetime? Why is it still me? And so I talk about that in the other part of the book.
Right on. Now, I've had the gut feeling and intuition for a long time that we are headed towards a very special time in human history, probably one of the most important times. I don't know exactly what that means, but some believe that within our lifetime we'll have the common knowledge that extraterrestrials exist and maybe even have open contact again. And I want to get each of your thoughts on this to close out with.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. That's why we're all here. This is going to be one of the most exciting times in the history of humanity, because the relationship now between the ETs and ourselves, it's not going to be overlords and peons or gods and slaves. It's going to be equals. And we need to accept the insight that we are being offered from our more mature brothers and sisters. And we need to be the stewards of this planet that we were meant to be. And we can be. We need to take our place. We need to stand up and take our place with the magnificent variety of intelligent, soulful beings that exist in this amazing creative matrix that we live in, that we exist in. So, and as a matter of fact, I think our next, I hope that Wes will be free to work with me on this. The next book I have planned is going to be just about that. It's going to be called Midwives of Disclosure.
Wow, great.
So that's coming, and we're going to be exploring that how do we do it? How do we step up? When will we step up? How do we combat the naysayers, the cynics, the paleo alt-right religious fundamentalists? How do we cope with this? Because again, we have this big diversity on our little blue watery planet.
Yes, very well said. Wes, what do you think?
I think that we're heading toward a bigger acknowledgement of this. I would love to see it in my lifetime. We're the vanguards of that movement, if you will. Lesley and I have some good friends that feel that experiencers and anyone involved with them need to be treated in a special way. I've never thought that, actually, about myself. I somewhat average, boring college professor who has been caught up in all this stuff, but I feel we are looking for wider acknowledgement of this. I say, why find this repugnant? Why find this unbelievable when you can believe in all sorts of other miracles that are not tangible and not provable, and there's no evidence of them? So I think we are moving towards this, and I'm happy to say again that I think aliens are us, and when we wake up and step through fear, we're going to be in a much richer life.
Very well said. Well, this was fantastic, and of course, I'd love to have you both back on again. Now, before you head out, Wes, let everybody know where they can find each of the books, and if you have any other social media or websites or anything like that, and same for you, Lesley.
So I want to point people towards wesgroberts.com, where just about everything is in terms of what I'm doing, my book links, links to these shows, for instance. And also, they can find me in Facebook. Wes G. Roberts is out there too. And certainly, I'm always happy to chat with people that have burning questions. So I'm open.
Fantastic. Leslie, how can people find
Excellent. Well, you can always reach me at Lesley, Lesley, at lightworkhypnosis.com. And even if you just have a query, if you want to know something's odd has happened, just reach out. I'm always happy to reach back, and I do that all the time. Now, you can also find out more about Contact TV from our Facebook page, which is Our Contact TV. And let's see, what else did I want to say? That's probably about it. And our books are all available on Amazon.ca or Amazon.com or wherever you happen to Amazon. And I am now also working as a mental health care professional with an organization called Opus, which was founded by Lesley Wes. And again, it is about experiencer support. And so there's a lot of help out there from compassionate people who will believe you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much. This was fantastic. And like I said, we'll definitely do it again in the future. And
Thanks,
until
Chris.
next time,
This is
everyone.
Thank you
both.
Chris.
Till next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See
Bye
y'all
now.
then.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Hello, friends. Have you noticed how much podcasts have grown in popularity over the past few years? We definitely have, and it's insane. We have an opportunity for your business to take advantage of the exponential growth of our podcast by advertising with us. We've been riding the podcast growth wave for a few years now, and we want you to take advantage of this too. We have unbeatable pricing and advertising packages, and we work with you on an individual basis to produce the most effective ad possible for our audience. If you would like to advertise with Forbidden Knowledge News, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. We look forward to all our new partnerships.